We are so grateful to all of you, and of course to the Clinton Library folks for hosting us here today. What a beautiful, beautiful space. And it's my pleasure to introduce now one of our co-chairs of our newly formed just about a year ago, Emerging Leaders Council, Brad Robertson. He didn't want me to tell you it's actually his birthday today. He's a partner at Bradley, Arendt, Bolt, Cummings law firm in Birmingham, Alabama, where his clients have included individuals, Fortune 100 companies. His practice focuses largely on representing clients through government investigations, litigation matters, I think with a healthcare expertise. And he previously worked, of course, at Sidley Austin, and that's why he and Father Pius are sitting right next to each other. But Brad actually had to put up with me. In addition to his high-profile legal work, he's been a very active, tremendous supporter of pro bono service, and his commitment to equal justice long predates his commitment to LSC. He's helped represent countless death row inmates, filed supporting briefs in litigation challenging the money bail system. When he worked at Sidley Austin, he took part in a pro bono case on behalf of a man on death row who suffered from permanent neurological damage, which the prior counsel had failed to reveal. In the end, as a result of that team's diligence, the circuit court recognized the client had received ineffective assistance and during sentencing. And what's happening in that matter now?
His sentence was commuted.
Yeah.
He's off death row.
So now, here we are. We're so lucky at LSC that he's co-leading the Emerging Leaders Council, has a BA from Vanderbilt, a law degree from the University of Chicago. He drove up here 6 hours from Birmingham to be with us.
Actually drove so fast to get here last night that I got pulled over. But they let me off with a warning, which was great. Thank you, John. That was a fantastic introduction, and it's great to be here with you guys this afternoon to discuss LSC's Emerging Leaders Council. I, as John said, am the co-chair of the Emerging Leaders Council. My other co-chair is Kristen Sonde. She couldn't be here with us today. She's the co-founder and COO of Paladin, which is a company that uses technology to help legal organizations run more efficient pro bono programs. So our council was formed last year, and we've really hit the ground running. We already have 52 members on the council, drawn from business, law, government, academia, and other fields, and they're all using their respective platforms to help increase public awareness about the crisis in civil legal aid. Members on our council are and will be participating in congressional briefings, speaking publicly about the value of civil legal aid, penning op-eds, and undertaking other outreach activities. Our efforts complement the already existing Leaders Council here at LSC, which was formed in 2015 and is led by Ken Frazier, the CEO of Merck, and Harriet Myers, a partner at Locke Lord and the former White House counsel to President George W. Bush. So far, our council has focused its efforts in 3 different areas. We've split up into 3 committees, and I'll tell you a bit about each one of them and what they've been doing. We have a Government Affairs Committee, whose mission is to educate Congress about the continuing need for civil legal aid in America. They work with LSC's Office of Government Relations, and they help educate federal lawmakers and their staffs about legal aid needs in the emerging leaders' local congressional districts. They also work with LSC grantees to find opportunities to invite congressional members and their staffs to visit local legal aid in the emerging leaders' home districts. Our second committee is the Graduate Student and Young Professional Engagement Committee. And that group helps educate law students and graduate students in law, business, public policy, and social sciences about the value and impact of civil legal aid and engages them in LSC's work. The third committee we have is the Communications Committee, and that works with LSC's public affairs staff to amplify the messages of LSC about the value and impact of civil legal aid through public speaking opportunities, as well as through social and print media. Although we're just getting going, we're just getting our feet wet, most of our members are already very active and excited to be doing what they can to help LSC. For example, almost every member of our communications committee has worked individually with LSC staff to establish projects and goals that they intend to accomplish in 2020. And many have already started displaying their support by magnifying LSC's messaging online through social media and that sort of thing. Nearly a dozen council members took part earlier this month in LSC's Innovations in Technology Conference in Portland, Oregon, both as presenters and as attendees. So it's a very exciting time to be an emerging leader, and we're looking forward to continue engaging our communities to help LSC pursue its mission of expanding equal access to justice across the country. Thank you very much.
I want to thank our hosts for a very warm welcome and providing really outstanding, beautiful venues. And it's now my pleasure to introduce Chief Judge Levensky R. Smith of the United States Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit. Chief Judge Smith worked both in private practice and public service before joining the bench. Most importantly, I think, he worked for 4 years for Ozark Legal Services. A former legal aid attorney myself, I acknowledge that our glory years are behind us, but at least you can count on us to understand what's at stake, and I think that's evidenced by Chief Judge Smith being here today. Judge Smith served on the Arkansas Public Service Commission, worked as a regulatory liaison to Governor Mike Huckabee. He was also a professor at John Brown University. In 1999, he was appointed by Governor Huckabee to Associate Judge of the Arkansas Supreme Court. He was nominated by President George W. Bush for the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals. He joined the court in 2002, became Chief Judge in 2017. Please join me in welcoming Chief Judge.
Just in case you are from out of state, some here in Arkansas refer to us as Arkansawers. So if you hear that term, it's not incorrect. It's a privilege and an honor to be with you this afternoon and to have a few minutes to share. And I hope my remarks will be of encouragement to you. I'm going to take my watch off and put it up here. I don't see a clock in the room. And I've been given the rundown of the timing, and the timing is crucial. Some of you may wonder what's the purpose of putting the watch up, but I remember there was a young boy who had a friend. The young boy was Baptist, and he invited his friend who was Methodist to go to church with him. And the two little boys went to church, and the Methodist boy was watching everything that took place, and he'd ask questions, well, what's that? Why do they do that? And he'd see the next event and go, well, why do they do that? And just as the minister got up to give the sermon, he took his watch off and put it on the podium, and he asked his friend, what does that mean? And the young Baptist looked at him and says, absolutely nothing. So hopefully that won't be the case right now. America is a nation of high ideals. Certainly, equal justice under law ranks as one of its highest. This principle, engraved on the entry of the United States Supreme Court, undergirds much of the promise of the land of liberty. How can America, though, truly be a land of liberty if liberty's protections are unavailable to some due to no or limited access to legal remedies that ensure it? I'm honored to be present today, and I commend all of you who are here are committed to providing legal information, advice, and representation to the underserved. I did not grow up aspiring to be an attorney. In fact, lawyer was not even on my list of potential career options. That all changed during college, however, as I finally began to pay attention to history and civics and to understand the vital role that law and courts play in American society, and even in my own life. Law touches virtually every area of life, from conception to beyond the grave. Legal documents impact us from the birth certificate to the death certificate, and we affect our descendants through our last will and testament or its absence. Business transactions, domestic relations, medical care, warranties, purchases of goods and services, loans and mortgages, all of these things have strong legal implications, and if one is unaware of their legal rights, can forfeit great advantage. But even more importantly, rights guaranteed by the Constitution or statutory laws are just paper promises without the ability to make them reality through force of law. When I graduated from college with a bachelor's degree in psychology and started working in Northwest Arkansas, it didn't take long to find the particular options available to me as an employee unpalatable, and a strong yearning to participate in my government, participate in life, in society in a positive way, and a visit with a law school professor at the University of Arkansas, Chauncey Brummer. Some of you may remember Professor Brummer, who's retired now, encouraged me to go ahead and apply to law school, and I did. And I took to it like a duck to water. It was hard work, but I loved the challenge. I loved the focus. I loved the ability to spend hours and hours dedicated to learning unfamiliar material. And the language didn't trouble me because I was always attracted to words and their usage and their meaning. And so it was a tremendous experience for me. Unfortunately, having no background in law, I missed out on some of the things I probably could and should have participated in. Instead, working on weekends, trying to help pay the bills as my wife worked to pay for me getting through law school. But getting through those 3 years was a wonderful experience. And then in the summer of '87, as I was wrapping up law school and anticipating my future, my wife and I decided we wanted to settle in Northwest Arkansas, and so I was focusing my attention for work opportunities there. And sure enough, I was an avid newspaper reader, and you had to be in that day if you wanted to know news. This was a pre-internet world. And I saw an advertisement in the want ads for a beginning staff attorney at Ozark Legal Services. And I thought to myself, there it is. That's an opportunity. I'm going to look into this. The advertised salary was $17,900 a year. Now, that wasn't very much 40 years ago. It's minuscule now, but it was more than I'd ever made in a year, and I was certainly willing to undertake to have the privilege to do that kind of work, even for that salary. I remember I'd just finished law school and I applied, and I got a call from Jamie Disley, who was the director of legal services at Ozark Legal Services. She interviewed me, and fortunately, she offered me the job contingent upon my passing the bar exam. I gladly accepted and continued in my preparation for the bar. And as the attorneys present may recall, the weeks between taking the bar exam and finding out whether you passed seemed interminable. Thankfully, I did pass the bar in late August and had the feeling just like Scott Turow, the writer of 1L, had put in his book. He said, passing the bar exam, when one does it, you don't have the sense that you have accomplished any great thing, but that you have just dodged a bullet. And that was exactly my sense, just a great sense of relief that now I'm employed. My first job duty at Legal Services was not interviewing a client or researching a legal issue, it was painting my office and cobbling together the furnishings for it from the orphan pieces around the office. Ozark Legal Services was probably like many offices around the country, staffed with eager, dedicated advocates and administrative personnel. Mona Teague, who has been in that role and a part of legal services ever since I started, and Susan Pirtle, someone mentioned Susan to me. Susan Still, she was an intern when I began as a staff attorney there at Legal Services. My first full week on the job, I was assigned 2 cases involving domestic abuse, and I'll never forget either one of them. The first involving a mother with, I believe, 6 children. She entered my office and spoke with such anguish about the abuse she had suffered. She did not speak much. She didn't have to speak much to convince me of the credibility of her account. It was obvious. Visible fresh bruises, as well as numerous healed ones, corroborated her plight. I wrote down the details, prepared pleadings for obtaining an ex parte restraining order, filed the case. My first appearance before a judge was advocating for that restraining order. It was granted. I went back to the office with a sense of achievement, which was tempered just 3 weeks later when the defendant's answer was due and I was informed that my client had returned home and back into an abusive condition. And again, months later, again, back in the cycle. But that didn't dim my hopes and dim my enthusiasm for the work I was getting the opportunity to do. The second case involved a much younger woman with only 1 child, an infant. Her interview opened my eyes to the nature of the work I was undertaking. She didn't know how to separate her legal problems from her life problems, and literally brought the whole basket of issues to me and plopped them on the desk and left it to me to sort out the legal and remediable from the personal. I explained the legal issues as best I could and what could be done, and gave her references for her other life issues. In addition to the domestic abuse cases, I also devoted substantial time to court appointments to serve as a guardian ad litem for abused and neglected juveniles. In the same year I began, the Arkansas Supreme Court declared the Arkansas juvenile justice system unconstitutional. It did so not just because it was antiquated, which it was, having been established in 1911, but that it lacked constitutional authorization. It also was lacking in other serious respects. It placed jurisdiction of juvenile matters in county courts under the control of the county judge. Now, if you're not familiar with Arkansas, a county judge is not a judicial officer. A county judge is the chief executive of the county. And I remember handling a paternity matter involving the custody of a child in the office of the county judge, who wasn't an attorney, who just kind of looked at I guess that looks, I won't go into the details of how that went down, but it was not a stellar representation of judicial decision making. And so it was a positive development to have that system come under scrutiny and be identified as substandard and also in need of replacement. Fortunately, it was, and after it was, the new system that was put in required juveniles who were then a part of the new juvenile review system, first under chancery judges, and then after the Constitution was amended and a new system put in place with circuit/chancery judges serving as juvenile judges, guardian ad litems were appointed for children whose custody was placed with the state. And Legal Services, I don't know if this was true all across Arkansas, but in the 11, 13 counties of northwest Arkansas, we got about every 4th appointment. And over my time at Legal Services, I think I represented close to 100 juveniles as guardian ad litem. And that was a truly heart-rending time. I had grown up in a small community that we had poor people, and I grew up not even knowing at times I could be considered one of them. That was just life. But I will never forget the time I was making a home visit to see about the home of a child who had been placed in state custody. My statutory obligation as guardian ad litem was to articulate, to represent the juvenile's best interest to the court and articulate their interests or their preferences to the court. And sometimes those things could be conflicting. And so you had to do the background. You had to go in and check into the home life, talk to the child in their setting in a foster home, go visit the parents, inspect the home, see what's going on. And I'll never forget going to Bentonville, which doesn't look anything like it does now, 30-some years ago. And I remember walking into the home, and I saw something that to this day I have never seen again. The infestation of roaches was so severe, this was mid-afternoon, it was so severe that the roaches were walking up and down the interior walls of the building, of the house, and not at all uncomfortable with the presence of people. Typically when light comes on or people are present, there's a scurry. There was no such thing. They were happy right where they were, and they probably were glad they weren't inside the walls where it was truly crowded. I had never seen anything quite like that, and all the other surfaces they were quite at home with. The family had a bathroom and a toilet. The toilet had ceased to function, but they had not ceased to employ its services. Visiting with the family, it became obvious. The attorney for the family, some of you may remember as a state judge here in the State Court of Appeals, and he and I visited the home together, and we walked out of the home together in unity that these kids didn't need to come home just yet. That was an eye-opening experience, to say the least, and to underscore the need for advocates for children in the courtroom, that their needs needed to be protected and their interests needed to be protected. After leaving legal services, I opened my own law practice, and I'm going to speed up here and conclude on time, don't worry. But I could talk about a number of my legal services experiences and joys over the years. One of the things that I enjoyed, one of the areas I enjoyed was doing consumer work and employing the available remedies that could be provided to people. Back then it was called the Soldiers and Sailors Civil Relief Act. I think today it's called the Service Members Relief Act. To help a wife whose husband's overseas, protect against garnishment of wages, to protect against eviction from a rental property or repossession of a valuable automobile to the family. Those were wonderful things to have as resources. The Fair Debt Collection Practices Act to keep people from getting wore down with dunning letters and phone calls. I could write a letter, tell them to call me, and their troubles ceased until something could be worked out without having a lot of anxiety added to their already mounting issues. But after leaving legal services, I opened my own law practice in Northwest Arkansas and carried with me the benefits of the tremendous training and experience of working at OLS. Legal services didn't pay very much, but the training was second to none. I got experience quick, but I went to trainings at, I remember Drake University, the National Institute of Trial Advocacy, put on a week-long training before actual judges, and there were students there or young lawyers there from all over the country, some from Ivy League schools and little old me from Arkansas. And I discovered then that the education I'd received at my state school was nowhere, was in no way second to those received in more famous institutions. And and my confidence level was increased dramatically in entering the courtroom in behalf of others. Also, I'll never forget, of course, my first business trip to California was to a week training at Berkeley, and learning how expensive life was in San Francisco. It floored me to see advertisements for a small one-bedroom place to live for $200,000. It's like, are you kidding? for that? But that was an amazing experience. The promise of equal justice under law depends not only on the courts and legislative bodies, but also on the commitment of a cross-section of society. LSC is part, so too are various other entities such as advocacy groups, bar associations, and individual attorneys. Fortunately, many are answering the call. The Federal Bar Association's Access to Justice Task Force has produced a free handbook for pro se litigants called Representing Yourself in Federal District Court. This is a copy of it. You can pull this up on their website, print it off, and pass it out to anybody that might be considering litigation in federal court, whether they're actually going to represent themselves or just get information to be able to talk well with an attorney. It's a very handy resource. Of the nearly 50,000 appeals in front of U.S. Circuit Courts last year, almost half of them were pro se. So it's vital to have these kinds of resources available to people. Federal courts themselves are now playing a larger role in the nation's civics education, and necessarily so. Civics education in our country is lamentable, and how little people understand about the connection of state and federal courts, the relation of state and federal laws, and remedies that are available in one or both. It is one of the things that Congress did just this past year, actually it was in 2018, Congress passed the Pro Bono Work to Empower and Represent Act of 2018. It's also known as the POWER Act for short. I don't know if any of you know of it, or almost certainly you have heard of it. Its stated intention is to promote pro bono legal services as a critical way in which to empower survivors of domestic violence. The Act lists 12 legislative findings, including the high incidence of domestic violence, and reporting on a study that found 83% of domestic violence victims with counsel obtained injunctive relief, whereas only 32% of those without counsel were able to receive it. The Act mandates that each federal district court lead not less than one public event in partnership with a state, local, tribal, or territorial domestic violence service provider, or a coalition and a state, local, tribal, or territorial domestic service provider, a project, something that provides information to the community, enabling people to get information on dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, and engage those citizens in assisting those survivors. The courts are to report annually to the Administrative Office of the Courts in Washington about the events conducted, and the AO in turn will report to Congress. This is a statute of limited duration, but it will be interesting to see the results over the next 2 to 3 years as it plays out. In conclusion, the high ideal of equal justice, like freedom itself, demands eternal vigilance. Self-governing people have their best hope of survival in that happy state if they also are a people with the character to be self-sacrificial for the benefit of others. May we all so choose.
Good afternoon. My name is Father Pius Petrick. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Board of Directors of the Legal Services Corporation. And a great thank you to Chief Judge Smith for his great words today on this panel. I think there are a few people who fulfill the promise of their hometown better than Judge Smith, because he is, of course, from a little town called Hope. I am told there's another famous Arkansan from the very same town. I think he also went into a life of civil service. It is also my great pleasure to introduce a member from the Arkansas Access to Justice community. We heard from the executive director last night, and Lee Richardson is here from Legal Aid of Arkansas to give some words. As we know, or as maybe you know, we visit, as John said, a number of cities during our board meetings. We visit 3 other than Washington when we go, and they're always great, joyful events for us. We love it. I love nothing more than coming to these different areas, to seeing our grantees, seeing and hearing about the work that we do. And so it is always a great, joyful experience for me. Yet at the same time, this meeting, while it is that, it is also touched with just a tinge of sadness, because I know that this is Jim Sandmann's last meeting with us as a board. And so a lot of people, I think, want to express to Jim, and have expressed to Jim. I was really surprised by the outpouring, I shouldn't have been, but was, the outpouring on social media when the announcement of Jim's retirement came through. And am impressed and delighted that so many people have come out to speak of their experience with Jim and everything that he's done for the legal services community. And so the Arkansas community actually asked us if they could take a little time to express their thanks to Jim for his work and everything that he has done for legal services. So Lee, I could invite you forward to make a few words.
First, I want to thank the Arkansas community for coming out in such large numbers and supporting the Arkansas Access to Justice Commission, Center for Arkansas Legal Services, and Legal Aid of Arkansas. This has been a great turnout. I know the Legal Services Corporation and all their staff and board members appreciate it, and it's been great. I've been to several of these, and this has been the best one I've been to yet. On behalf of the Arkansas Justice community, we want to recognize Jim Sandmann for 9 years of selfless service in advancing the idea of access to justice. The first time I saw Mr. Sandmann, he said, "I'm here to help." The second thing he said is, "Don't call me Mr. Sandmann, it's Jim." And he was sincere. And it's always been Jim since then, and he's always helped. He also told us that he answered his own email and that he answered his own phone. And I've always found that to be true as well. He doesn't travel with an entourage. He's an everyman to me. I don't know what his background is, but he seems just like someone from the Ozarks as far as I'm concerned. He's always been here when we needed him. He's had our back. He's taken care of us in Washington. We've always trusted him. And Jim Sandmann's a true humanitarian. We thank you very much for your service.
It means the world to me to have that tribute from my colleagues on the ground in the world of legal aid. I spent most of my career, 30 years, in a big law firm, Arnold & Porter. I served as the firm's managing partner for 10 years. I came to a point in my life and my career where I realized that I wasn't doing what I should be doing. I came to a point where I felt that what I was doing for a living was not in sync with who I am as a person and what my personal values are. And I decided I needed to make a change. And I looked around at the lawyers I admired and respected the most, the ones I wished I were like. And to a person, they were devoting themselves full-time to the service of others. Whereas in my pro bono work, I felt like I was just dabbling in an extracurricular activity that for them was a career and a life. The example they set motivated me to make a change in my career and to join them. I will never be them. I will never be able to say that I devoted the entirety of my career to the service of others. But I will always be grateful for the inspiration they have given me, for the example they have set for me, and for as long as I live, I'll be trying to catch up to them. Thank you.
You know, I often, when people ask me about my service on LSC, and I've been on the board almost 10 years now, I always say the same thing. If I had done nothing else, I would be proud of the fact that we hired Jim Sandman. I still say that today. It is my greatest accomplishment as a member of the board to have had some small part in hiring. And I remember, I don't know if Jim does, I remember the first time I talked to Jim on the phone. I was still in Zanesville, Ohio. If you think the Ozarks are small, go to Zanesville. And Jim, we were talking about LSC, and the one thing that he remarked to me, which struck me, because I don't think I had been to the headquarters at that point, is that when he had visited the headquarters at LSC, he was surprised that he saw lots of pictures of federal officials and government officials and all sorts of things, but there were no pictures of any of the people we served. There were no images of poor people. When you get off the elevator today on the conference room floor, what is in front of you? Pictures of people we serve, pictures of the poor. That is a small symbolic image, but I think speaks mountains about Jim, about the attitude that he has about our work, and about the legacy that he is going to leave. Jim, and in Jim's work, the needs of the poor and service to the poor has always been at the forefront of what we do, so that the faces of the poor are never far from our sight, and nor should they be. We rightly say to Jim, thank you for your service to LSC, but it's not enough. Jim's service has not simply been to some government agency. Jim, thank you for your service to this nation's poor. Jim, thank you for your service to this country, because the efforts that you have put in over your 9 years will have a long, long effect, far after we're all gone. And not just the poor, but this nation owes you its gratitude for all the work that you have done to make the lives of the poor better and more just. You will never get the kudos you deserve, but we hope in some small way our thanks here today will be a slight note that will echo throughout the rest of the country. Thank you, Jim, for your service. Thank you what you've done for America's poor. Thank you for the example you give to all of us. And thank you all for your presence here today and your support of America's poor. This is the end to our program this afternoon. The board has some boring stuff to attend to later today.
Grantees are the Arkansas grantees.
Oh, grantees, I'm sorry. Well, we have some business, but the Arkansas grantees will give us their presentation later today, and we have our board meeting tomorrow, but not quite in this splendor, I think, into a small windowless conference room in the hotel. But we thank you very much for all the work that you have done for us, all your support of legal services. And we look forward to coming back to Arkansas in about 13 or 14 years.